Strangely enough, there's left in the world today an area as big as the United States that's never been seen by a human being.
There is only one untouched reservoir of raw materials left in the world, and that's in the region known as Antarctica.
As I said, it's the most peaceful place in the world, but I don't think it will be for long.
The American government is sending a naval expedition to that region.
The bottom of the world will be important, not only to us, but to our allies. It has to do with the future of the nation, those to come after us.
In the first half of the 20th century, Antarctic exploration paralleled the battlefront ideology. While war waged in the Pacific and Atlantic, nations ventured to Antarctica to tap into its untouched reservoirs of coal, petroleum, and minerals. In 1907, Great Britain made the first claim to the Antarctic, igniting a period of exploration and conquest. By 1943, 7 nations had collectively claimed 80% of the continent, and some claims overlapped. In the high-stakes nuclear landscape following World War II, the risk of conflict in Antarctica intensified.
It was the very real threat of the nuclear war. My father created this policy of the mutual destruction. Then he told, we have to build enough weapons to destroy American infrastructure.
The view of nations at that time was that if we are going to explore the Antarctic, that we ought not to encourage any country to arm those areas.
Leading the charge against the militarization of the Antarctic was United States President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Attempting to ease the hostility between the United States and the USSR, Eisenhower supported the International Council of Scientific Unions and the creation of the International Geophysical Year from 1957 to 1958.
The most important result of the International Geophysical Year is the demonstration of the ability of peoples of all nations to work together harmoniously for the common good.
As part of the International Geophysical Year, scientists from around the world collaborated to study climate and marine life in Antarctica. When the year came to a close, controversy erupted among the United States government regarding whether to continue cooperation with the USSR. Many senators were captivated by the anti-communist Red Scare which had begun to dominate the American political climate. But Eisenhower, having worked closely with the Soviets as a World War II commander, had a different perspective.
And so he is somebody who knew the problems in dealing with the Soviets, and he also knew the possibilities. A lot of Americans knew nothing about the possibilities.
And there were 90 secret meetings in the United States during the late 1950s with the Soviet Union.
Overruling his Joint Chiefs of Staff, Eisenhower conducted these secret meetings to negotiate the terms of the treaty. Despite persistent controversy, the treaty was signed on December 1, 1959 by all 12 nations from the International Geophysical Year. The treaty ensured that scientists would be able to collaborate and exchange data easily. It also banned nuclear testing, storage, or disposal on the continent. The land was forever to be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. As the world's first non-armament agreement, the Antarctic Treaty has served as a critical framework for subsequent treaties. Addressing the United Nations in 1960, President Eisenhower proposed that the principles of the Antarctic Treaty be applied to outer space.
The nations of the world have recently united in declaring the continent of Antarctica off limits to military preparations. We could extend this principle to an even more important sphere.
After 7 years of deliberation, his proposal eventually resulted in the Outer Space Treaty, with outer space joining Antarctica as an international zone, free from international discord or national appropriation. In fact, nearly 95% of environmental and ecosystem treaties were signed after the Antarctic Treaty, indicating the treaty's success as a catalyst for further global cooperation.
The same motivation in all exploration, it is curiosity. What was there, what was here, what is beyond the horizon?
Antarctica is a natural laboratory for scientific exploration. Its unique position as a relatively untouched continent allows scientists to conduct valuable research about the history of the Earth and humanity's impact on it. The stratified layers of glaciers have revealed the natural warming and cooling cycles in Earth's history. In 1985, British Antarctic researchers published a discovery that the ozone layer was being depleted due to the release of CFCs from household appliances. Just 1 year later, nations worldwide signed the Montreal Protocol to phase out the use of CFCs. By informing important policy decisions, Antarctic research helps prove the continent's value as a hub for scientific exploration. As mandated by the demilitarization in Article 1 and the exchange of personnel in Article 3, the Antarctic Treaty has allowed scientists from around the world to peacefully encounter each other. One of the most remarkable accomplishments of the treaty was its success in excluding the Antarctic from the Falklands War. While Argentina waged war on the British-owned Falkland Islands, the fighting was blocked from moving into the Antarctic Treaty Zone. 800 miles to the south in Antarctica, British and Argentinian scientists continued to peacefully encounter each other. In the same vein, the Antarctic Treaty has been praised for helping to end the Cold War, opening up communication between the United States and the Soviet Union. Article 3 of the Antarctic Treaty prioritizes the exchange of scientific observations and results rather than commercial activity.
Data is open and freely available in Antarctica because it is like gems. It's precious because we go places nobody has ever been, and it'll be a long time before anybody goes back.
Because of the Antarctic's isolation, the treaty's framers strove to prevent corruption and conflict by limiting commercial activity. Thus, Article 9 of the treaty makes it illegal for nations to profit directly from Antarctica. Since 1959, scientists have been cooperating in the treaty zone, exchanging data rather than competing for ownership of land and resources as the early Antarctic explorers once did. Unfortunately, such cooperative exploration, encounter, and exchange has not come without its drawbacks. When the United Nations passed the Outer Space Treaty in 1967, outer space joined Antarctica as an international zone. This meant that no portion of outer space or Antarctica could be claimed by any nation. When Apollo 11 planted an American flag on the moon, NASA publicly clarified that this had no legal significance. Because the treaties eliminate the land and resource motivation for nations, they may have actually slowed exploration.
There was sort of a final spasm of physical exploration of our surroundings that was typical of the 1950s. Because I grew up with it, and I thought it would last forever. I detect a lot less of that now.
Although government-sponsored exploration may be in decline, the emerging private sector remains optimistic. Today, companies like Deep Space Industries are developing technologies in order to mine resources from asteroids. They have attempted to avoid the limitations of the Outer Space Treaty by exploiting its loopholes.
And the very fact that you can't own real estate in space doesn't mean that you can't own resources. And that's what we're doing. We're using the law to enable humans to explore and exchange ideas and material rather than using the law as a hindrance.
The necessity for these companies to identify such loopholes stems from the legal framework which has become increasingly outdated.
The people who wrote the treaty didn't have crystal balls. They didn't know asteroids might be full of nickel iron or other rare earth elements.
The future of both the Antarctic Treaty and the Outer Space Treaty relies on humanity's success in answering the question that remains: is exploration always dependent upon ownership? In the final analysis, the Antarctic Treaty was more than just a remarkable non-armament agreement. It was representative of the triumph of peace and science over competition and supremacy during the animosity of the Cold War. Nations with previously strained relations were now brought together in collaboration, united in their efforts to protect the last wilderness on Earth. Not only stunningly beautiful, Antarctica was and continues to be a crucial laboratory for the human race to study impending global concerns. The Outer Space Treaty, as well as the many other environmental agreements born out of the Antarctic Treaty, emphasized the idea that such international spaces have the power to encourage scientific cooperation. Indeed, it was only through the sacrifice of physical exploration for scientific exploration that nations began to strike a delicate balance between national interests and common interests. For the future, treaty revision should be tied to advances in technology, redefining our common interests and ensuring continued global cooperation as we explore our newest horizons.